You expect to get paid for doing nothing just because you're pregnant? Get out of my house, you lazy maid." The rich woman's voice echoed through the grand foyer, dripping with disdain as she pointed to the door. Sophie, heavily pregnant and clutching her cleaning supplies, felt tears sting her eyes. She had worked tirelessly, but this woman saw only an inconvenience. What she didn't know was that her husband, the cold-hearted CEO, was just around the corner, witnessing every word. But before we see how Sophie gets her justice, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get into the full story. I won't have some lazy pregnant woman waddling around my house breaking things. Victoria Blackwood's voice sliced through the quiet morning air of the mansion. You're fired. Pack your things and leave immediately. Sophie Johnson stood frozen, one hand still clutching the feather duster, the other instinctively moving to her stomach. The beautiful crystal vase she had been carefully cleaning reflected the morning sunlight, casting small rainbows across the spotless marble floor of the Blackwood mansion's main living room. "Mrs. Blackwood, please," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need this job. I can still work just as hard as before." Victoria Blackwood, dressed in a perfectly pressed white blouse and tailored pants, pointed a manicured finger at Sophie's midsection. "How far along are you? Don't lie to me." Sophie swallowed hard. 4 months, ma'am." 4 months, and you've been hiding it under those loose uniforms. I consider that dishonesty, Sophie. I cannot have dishonest people working in my home." Sophie had woken up that morning in her small East Los Angeles apartment feeling more nauseous than usual. She had taken her prenatal vitamins with a piece of toast, the only breakfast her stomach could handle these days. The bus ride to Beverly Hills had been long, as always. She watched through the window as the neighborhoods transformed from crowded apartment buildings to spacious homes with manicured lawns. When she arrived at the 3-story Blackwood mansion at 7:30 in the morning, Sophie had greeted Tom, the security guard, with her usual smile. "Morning, Sophie," Tom had said. "You feeling okay? You look a little pale." "Just tired," Sophie had replied, touching her belly briefly when Tom wasn't looking. For 3 years, Sophie had cleaned this house 6 days a week. She knew every corner, every expensive item, and exactly how Mrs. Blackwood wanted things done. The enormous house had 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, and a pool house bigger than Sophie's entire apartment. Now, in the living room with Victoria Blackwood staring at her with cold eyes, Sophie felt her world crumbling. "Please, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm a good worker. You've never had complaints about my cleaning. This isn't about your cleaning, though I'm sure that would suffer too. This is about professionalism. You should have told me when you found out. Now I want you gone within 30 minutes. Victoria turned to leave but stopped and added, "And don't expect a reference letter." As Victoria's footsteps faded down the hallway, Sophie's shoulders slumped. Tears filled her eyes as she looked around the immaculate room. The crystal vases she had been dusting cost more than she earned in 2 months. Sophie earned $15 an hour working for the Blackwoods. After taxes, she barely made enough to cover her rent and basic needs. She lived paycheck to paycheck in her small apartment in East Los Angeles. Now, with a baby coming, she needed this job more than ever. 5 months ago, Sophie had met Michael Reynolds at a company training event. Elite Cleaning Services had organized a day-long training for all staff. Michael was the CEO, but he had personally conducted part of the training. He was tall with light brown skin, hazel eyes, and a warm smile that made Sophie feel special when he directed it at her. "You have very high attention to detail," he had told her during a cleaning demonstration. "That's exactly what our premium clients need." They had exchanged numbers, and to Sophie's surprise, he had called her that same evening to ask her to dinner. Their relationship had been brief but intense. For several wonderful weeks, they had spent every free moment together. Sophie had fallen hard for the successful businessman who treated her with respect and kindness. Then, Michael had traveled to New York for business. He promised to call when he arrived, but the call never came. Sophie tried reaching him multiple times, but his number had changed. With no other way to contact him, Sophie had eventually accepted that their relationship was over. 1 month after Michael disappeared, Sophie discovered she was pregnant. Now she walked to the staff room at the back of the Blackwood mansion and collected her few personal items: a water bottle, a small framed photo of her mother, and her lunch bag. She changed from her uniform into her regular clothes, her hand lingering on her small but now visible baby bump. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "I'll figure something out." Unknown to both Sophie and Victoria, Michael Reynolds stood frozen in the hallway outside the living room. He had arrived for a surprise inspection of Elite Cleaning Services premium clients. The Blackwoods were one of their most important customers, and Michael wanted to ensure they were receiving excellent service. He had entered using the security code only to hear Victoria Blackwood's harsh voice. And then, he had heard Sophie's voice, the woman he had searched for since returning from New York. Michael's phone had been stolen on his first day in New York. When he returned to Los Angeles and got a new phone, he had lost all his contacts. He had been asking around the office about Sophie, but no one knew much about the quiet maid who kept to herself. All he knew was that she worked at one of their client homes in Beverly Hills, but not which one. Now, as Sophie walked toward the front door with tears streaming down her face, Michael remained hidden, processing what he had just heard. Sophie was pregnant. The timing suggested the baby could be his, and Victoria Blackwood had just fired her for being pregnant, a clear case of discrimination. Sophie paused at the grand front door, taking one last look at the mansion. Tom, the security guard, gave her a sympathetic nod as she walked past him toward the bus stop. "Take care of yourself, Sophie," Tom said quietly. "Thank you, Tom," Sophie replied, her voice breaking. "You too." As Sophie disappeared down the street, Michael stepped out from his hiding place. His mind was racing. He needed to follow her, to find out where she lived, to talk to her. But first, he needed to deal with Victoria Blackwood. He stepped into the living room where Victoria was now arranging fresh flowers in one of the crystal vases Sophie had been dusting. "Mrs. Blackwood," Michael said, causing Victoria to jump slightly. "Mr. Reynolds, I didn't hear you come in." Victoria recovered quickly, putting on a practiced smile. "We weren't expecting you today." "I apologize for the scheduling confusion," Michael said, his voice carefully controlled. "I just wanted to check that everything is satisfactory with our service." "Oh yes, mostly," Victoria said, not mentioning Sophie. "Though I've just had to let one of your staff go. I'll be calling your office later to request a replacement." Michael nodded stiffly. "I see. I'll make sure that's handled promptly. I'm afraid I can't stay for our planned inspection today. Something urgent has come up." Victoria looked disappointed but nodded. "Of course. Business emergencies happen to us all." Michael left quickly, rushing to his Tesla parked outside. Through the windshield he could see Sophie at the bus stop down the street. The bus was just pulling up. "I won't lose you again," he whispered, starting his car. Michael gripped his steering wheel tightly as he followed the city bus through the streets of Beverly Hills. His heart pounded in his chest. After months of searching for Sophie, he had found her in the most unexpected way. The bus traveled east, leaving the clean streets of Beverly Hills behind. The neighborhoods changed gradually, from large houses with perfect lawns to apartment buildings and smaller homes. Michael kept a safe distance behind the bus, afraid of losing it at a turn or traffic light. Inside the bus, Sophie held her small box of belongings on her lap. Tears rolled down her face as she stared out the window. This wasn't the first time she had faced discrimination. It was the third job she had lost since moving to Los Angeles 5 years ago from Detroit. But this time was different. This time she had a baby to worry about. "What am I going to do now?" she whispered to herself, placing one hand on her small baby bump. An older woman sitting beside Sophie offered her a tissue. "Are you okay, dear?" Sophie accepted the tissue with a sad smile. "I just lost my job. I'm sorry to hear that. My daughter lost her job when she was pregnant too. It's not right, but things will get better. After 45 minutes, the bus reached Sophie's stop in the Westlake area. She stepped off, holding her box tightly against her chest. The summer heat hit her immediately as she walked the 2 blocks to her apartment building, Westlake Gardens. The name sounded nicer than the place actually was. The 3-story building was clean but old, with peeling paint and a small courtyard that had more concrete than plants. Sophie approached her door on the 2nd floor, struggling to find her keys while holding the box. Her hands were shaking, and she dropped the keys twice before finally getting them into the lock. "Sophie?" The male voice behind her made her freeze. She knew that voice. She had replayed it in her dreams for months. Slowly, she turned around. Michael Reynolds stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at her. He wore an expensive gray suit that made him look just as handsome as she remembered. His hazel eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "How did you find me?" Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I followed your bus," Michael said, taking a step up the stairs. "Can we talk?" "Please." Sophie wanted to slam the door in his face. She wanted to scream at him for disappearing. She wanted to ask him why he never called. But she was tired, emotionally drained, and suddenly very aware of how much her feet hurt. "Fine," she said, pushing her door open. "Come in." Michael followed Sophie into her small 1-bedroom apartment. It was neat and clean with simple furniture and a few houseplants on the windowsill. He noticed a small collection of baby books on the coffee table and a tiny yellow onesie folded beside them. Sophie set her box down and turned to face him. "Why are you here, Michael?" "I heard everything at the Blackwood house," he said. "Victoria firing you because you're pregnant. It's illegal. It's discrimination." "That doesn't explain how you disappeared for months," Sophie said, crossing her arms over her chest. Michael ran a hand through his short, curly hair. "My phone was stolen in New York, Sophie. On my first day there, someone took it right out of my jacket at a restaurant. I lost all my contacts. I got a new phone but couldn't remember your number." "You could have contacted me through the company," Sophie said, her voice rising slightly. "You knew I worked for Elite Cleaning." "I tried," Michael insisted. "I've been asking around the office for months about you. No one seemed to know much. They just said you were a housemaid assigned to a Beverly Hills client. I didn't know which one." A knock on the open door interrupted them. A woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail stood there, wearing scrubs with small cartoon animals on them. "Everything okay in here, Sophie?" the woman asked, eyeing Michael suspiciously. "It's fine, Elena," Sophie said with a tired smile. "This is Michael." "Michael, this is my neighbor, Elena Rodriguez." "The Michael?" Elena asked, raising an eyebrow. Sophie nodded slightly, and understanding passed between the 2 women. "I'll be right next door if you need anything," Elena said pointedly before leaving. Michael looked at Sophie. "She knows about me?" "She knows I was dating someone named Michael who disappeared when I found out I was pregnant," Sophie said, sitting down on her small couch. "She's been very supportive." Michael sat in the chair across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Sophie, I swear I didn't know about the baby. If I had known—" "What?" Sophie asked. "What would you have done?" "I would have been here," Michael said firmly. "I wouldn't have left you alone." Sophie reached for her phone on the coffee table and opened her messages. She handed it to Michael. "I sent you 17 text messages after you left. The first 5 were normal. The next 12 were me trying to tell you I was pregnant." Michael scrolled through the messages, all marked undelivered. His face fell as he read them. "They never went through," he said quietly. "After my phone was stolen, the number was disconnected." Sophie watched his face carefully, looking for any sign that he was lying. She had imagined this moment many times over the past months, confronting Michael, telling him about the baby. In her imagination, he always had excuses. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine shock and regret in his eyes, she began to believe him. "It's a girl," Sophie said after a long silence. Michael looked up from the phone. What? The baby. It's a girl. I found out last week. Michael's eyes widened and then filled with tears. A daughter? We're having a daughter? The word "we" hung in the air between them. Sophie hadn't thought of the baby as theirs for months now. It had been just hers, her responsibility, her worry, her future. I don't know what "we" means right now, Michael, Sophie said honestly. I just lost my job. I'm 4 months pregnant. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent next month. Michael set the phone down and moved to sit beside her on the couch. He didn't touch her, respecting the distance she had created. Let me help, he said. Please, whatever you need. I don't want your money, Sophie said quickly. Not just money, Michael said. I want to be involved, Sophie. In everything. Doctor's appointments, preparing for the baby, all of it. I want to be a father to our daughter. Sophie felt tears forming again. She was so tired of crying today. How do I know you won't disappear again? I won't, Michael promised. I'll give you my new number. I'll give you my email, my address, my work schedule. You can meet my parents. Anything you need to trust me again. Before Sophie could respond, her phone rang. It was her doctor's office confirming her prenatal appointment for the next morning. After she hung up, Michael asked, Can I come with you? To the appointment tomorrow? Sophie looked at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to say no, to protect herself from being hurt again. But another part, a part that had been afraid and alone for months, wanted to say yes. It's at 9 in the morning, she said finally. Downtown Medical Center. Michael smiled, the first real smile since he had arrived. I'll pick you up at 8:30. As Sophie showed Michael to the door, they both knew this was just the beginning of a complicated conversation. There were still many questions to answer, trust to rebuild, and plans to make. But for the first time in months, Sophie didn't feel completely alone. After Michael left, Sophie stood by her window and watched him walk to his car. Her hand rested on her belly, where their daughter grew stronger every day. Your dad came back, she whispered. Now we'll see if he stays. Sophie woke up early the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it on her nightstand and saw a text from Michael. Good morning? Looking forward to the appointment today? I'll be there at 8:30. Is there anything you need? She typed a quick response. Just be on time. Sophie set her phone down and got out of bed slowly. Her back hurt a little, a new pregnancy symptom that had started last week. As Sophie made herself a simple breakfast of toast and tea, she heard a knock on her door. When she opened it, she found Mr. Patterson, her landlord, standing there with a folder in his hands. Morning, Sophie, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. I need to talk to you about something. Sophie invited him in, already feeling worried about what he might say. I'm sorry to tell you this, Mr. Patterson began, opening his folder, but I'm increasing the rent starting next month. It'll be $200 more. Sophie sat down hard on her kitchen chair. 200 more? Mr. Patterson, that's almost 20% higher. I know, he said, shuffling his papers. But property taxes went up and repairs cost more now. Everyone in the building is getting the same increase. After Mr. Patterson left, Sophie checked her bank account on her phone. She had less than $500 saved. With no job and the rent increase, she would be completely out of money in less than a month. At exactly 8:30, Sophie's phone buzzed again. Michael was waiting outside. She grabbed her purse and headed down the stairs, trying to push aside her worries about money for now. Michael stood beside his shiny Tesla, dressed more casually today in jeans and a button-down shirt. He smiled when he saw her. You look nice, he said, opening the passenger door for her. Sophie didn't mention that she had spent 20 minutes choosing an outfit that would look decent, but not make it seem like she was trying too hard to impress him. As they drove to Downtown Medical Center, Michael asked, Did you sleep okay? Not really, Sophie admitted. My landlord came by this morning. He's raising my rent by $200 next month. Michael frowned. That's a big increase. Is that even legal? It is if he gives 30 days notice, which he did. Sophie decided not to tell Michael about her bank account balance or her job worries right now. She needed to get through this doctor's appointment first. At the medical center, they checked in at the reception desk. The nurse called Sophie's name 15 minutes later. As they followed her to the exam room, Michael looked nervous. "Have you been to one of these appointments before?" Sophie asked him quietly. Michael shook his head. "Never." The exam room was small, with medical posters on the walls. The nurse took Sophie's blood pressure and weight, then had her change into a gown. When the doctor came in, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes named Dr. Carter, she seemed surprised to see Michael. "You must be the father," Dr. Carter said, extending her hand. "Yes, I'm Michael," he said, shaking her hand. "I just found out about the baby." Dr. Carter nodded, not asking for details. She had Sophie lie back on the exam table and put gel on her stomach. Then she moved a small device around on Sophie's belly. Suddenly, a rapid whooshing sound filled the room. Michael's eyes widened. "Is that—" he began. "That's your baby's heartbeat," Dr. Carter confirmed. "Strong and healthy." Michael reached for Sophie's hand without thinking. She let him take it, watching his face as he listened to their daughter's heartbeat for the first time. His eyes filled with tears. "And you're sure it's a girl?" Michael asked. "We are," Dr. Carter said, pointing to the screen where a grainy image appeared. "Everything looks good. The baby is developing normally." After the appointment, Michael took Sophie to lunch at a restaurant near the medical center. As they ate, Michael brought up something Sophie had been avoiding thinking about. "Sophie, what Victoria Blackwood did yesterday was illegal," he said. "Firing someone because they're pregnant is discrimination. You could sue her." Sophie set down her fork. "With what money, Michael? Lawyers are expensive. And even if I won, do you know how long that would take? I need a job now." "I could help with the legal costs," Michael offered. "That's not the only issue," Sophie explained. "If I sue the Blackwoods, I'll never work in Beverly Hills again. Those rich people all know each other. Victoria would make sure no one hired me." Michael was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "What if you didn't need to work as a housemaid anymore?" "What do you mean?" "Come work at Elite Cleaning Services," Michael said. "In the office. We need someone in client relations, someone who understands the cleaning work from experience." Sophie stared at him. "Are you offering me a job because you feel guilty?" "No," Michael said firmly. "I'm offering you a job because you're qualified. You've worked directly with our most demanding clients for years. You know the standards better than most of our office staff. People will think I got the job because of—" Sophie gestured to her stomach. "Let them think what they want," Michael said. "We know the truth. You're good at what you do, Sophie, and you deserve better than cleaning houses for people who don't respect you." After lunch, Michael drove Sophie to the Elite Cleaning Services headquarters in a modern office building downtown. The office was open and bright with about 20 people working at desks. As they walked in, a thin woman with short blonde hair approached them immediately. "Michael, your 1 o'clock called to reschedule, and the Jenkins account needs your signature on the new contract." She looked at Sophie with obvious curiosity. "Thank you, Diane," Michael said. "This is Sophie Johnson." "Sophie, this is Diane Miller, my executive assistant." Diane's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Nice to meet you." Michael gave Sophie a tour of the office, introducing her to everyone. Some people were friendly while others seemed confused or surprised by her presence. Sophie felt out of place in her simple maternity dress among people in business clothes. "And this would be your desk," Michael said, showing her a workspace near the front. "You'd handle client calls, help resolve any issues, and use your experience to improve our service." A tall black man approached them with a warm smile. "You must be Sophie. I'm James Wilson, HR Director. Michael told me you might be joining us." "He did?" Sophie asked, surprised. "Just this morning," James said. He called to ask about our parental leave policies and benefits for new employees. Sophie looked at Michael, who shrugged. I wanted to be prepared. Later, in Michael's office, Sophie sat across from him at his large desk. The office had a view of downtown Los Angeles through floor-to-ceiling windows. The job pays $55,000 a year to start, Michael said, with full benefits, including health insurance that would cover all your prenatal care and delivery. It was more than twice what Sophie made as a housemaid. She could actually save money with a salary like that. I need to think about it, Sophie said, and we need to talk about us, what this means. Michael nodded. I understand. I know I can't just walk back into your life and expect everything to be fine. I want our daughter to have her father in her life, Sophie said, but I need time to trust you again. And if I take this job, I need to know it's really because I'm qualified, not because you feel responsible for me. That's fair, Michael said. We can take things slowly. Get to know each other again. After Sophie left to go home, Michael stayed late at the office. He opened his laptop and searched for information about Richard Blackwood, Victoria's husband. There was a lot to find. Richard was a successful investment banker who sat on several corporate boards, including the parent company that owned Elite Cleaning Services. Michael sat back in his chair thinking. His plan to help Sophie had just gotten a lot more complicated. If Richard Blackwood wanted to, he could cause serious problems for Michael's company. But Michael couldn't ignore what Victoria had done to Sophie. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Sophie. I've been thinking about your job offer, she said. I want to take it, but I need us to agree that our personal relationship stays separate from work. Absolutely, Michael promised. You'll be treated like any other employee. No special treatment. After they hung up, Michael looked again at the article showing Richard Blackwood on the board of his parent company. He would have to be very careful about how he handled this situation. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let Victoria Blackwood get away with what she'd done to Sophie. Michael closed his laptop and leaned back in his office chair. He had promised Sophie her job was based on her qualifications, not their personal relationship. But with Richard Blackwood on the board of his parent company, keeping their professional and personal lives separate would be harder than he thought. 2 weeks later, Sophie sat at her new desk at Elite Cleaning Services, answering a client call. She wore a simple blue maternity dress that Elena had helped her pick out for her office job. Yes, Mrs. Anderson, I understand your concerns about the new cleaning products, Sophie said into her headset. I used those same products when I was a housekeeper, and I can assure you they're safe for your marble countertops. The client sounded relieved. Oh, you've actually used them yourself? That's so helpful. Thank you, Sophie. After ending the call, Sophie made a note in the client file. Her knowledge of cleaning techniques had already helped solve several client issues in her first 2 weeks. Diane walked past Sophie's desk, dropping a stack of files in her inbox without speaking. Since Sophie had started, Michael's executive assistant had been cold toward her, providing minimal training and forgetting to invite her to staff meetings. James from HR stopped by a few minutes later. How's it going, Sophie? Getting settled in? Everyone's been very helpful, Sophie said, not mentioning Diane. I'm learning a lot. Good to hear. Those client satisfaction scores have improved since you started. Keep up the great work. As James walked away, Sophie overheard 2 employees at the coffee machine. She's only here because she's having the boss's baby, one whispered. I heard she used to clean houses for our clients, the other replied. Talk about sleeping your way up. Sophie pretended not to hear. She focused on her computer screen, blinking back tears. Her pregnancy hormones made everything feel more intense lately. In his office, Michael was reviewing reports when Diane entered with a concerned expression. Richard Blackwood's office just called, she said. He wants to meet with you tomorrow at the Beverly Hills Golf Club at 11 in the morning. Michael felt his stomach tighten. Did they say what it's about? No, Diane replied, but I've had 3 calls this morning from clients in Beverly Hills. They all specifically requested that the new girl Sophie not be involved with their service. Michael frowned. That's strange. Sophie's been doing excellent work. Maybe, Diane said, but these are our top clients. Mrs. Henderson even threatened to cancel her service if Sophie calls her again. After Diane left, Michael called Sophie into his office and closed the door. Is something wrong? Sophie asked, noticing his serious expression. Have you had any difficult interactions with clients from Beverly Hills? Michael asked. No, Sophie said. Why? Michael explained about the client requests and Richard Blackwood's meeting. It's Victoria, Sophie said immediately. She must be telling her friends not to work with me. That's what I was thinking, Michael agreed. And now her husband wants to meet with me. Will you be okay? Sophie asked. I know his company owns part of yours. Don't worry about that, Michael assured her. You focus on doing your job well. I'll handle Richard Blackwood. Later that afternoon, Sophie's phone rang. It was Elena, sounding upset. Sophie, someone broke into our apartment building. They stole packages from the mailroom, including those baby things you ordered online. I'm leaving work now, Sophie said, grabbing her purse. Are you and the kids okay? We're fine, we weren't home, but they broke the outside door lock. Mr. Patterson says he can't get anyone to fix it until tomorrow. When Sophie arrived at her apartment building, she found Elena waiting outside with her 2 children, Maria, who was 7, and Carlos, who was 10. Michael is on his way, Sophie told Elena. He insisted on checking the security when I told him what happened. Your boyfriend is coming here? Carlos asked with interest. Is he rich? Elena said he drives a fancy car. Carlos, Elena scolded. That's not polite. Sophie smiled at the boy. He's not exactly my boyfriend. It's complicated, but yes, he has a nice car. Michael arrived 15 minutes later. He immediately examined the broken lock on the building's main entrance. This is completely inadequate, he told Mr. Patterson, who had come to see what was happening. Even if you replace it, it's not secure enough. It's all the building budget allows, Mr. Patterson said with a shrug. Michael turned to Sophie. Let me check your apartment too. Upstairs, Michael inspected Sophie's door locks and windows while Elena and her children waited in the living room. Carlos watched Michael with fascination. Do you know math? Carlos asked suddenly. I have homework I don't understand. Michael looked surprised but smiled. I was pretty good at math in school. What are you working on? While Sophie and Elena made tea in the kitchen, Michael sat with Carlos at the dining table, helping him with fractions. Maria colored quietly beside them. He's good with kids, Elena observed quietly. Apparently, Sophie agreed, watching Michael explain a math problem to Carlos with surprising patience. Later, after Elena and her children had gone back to their apartment, Michael and Sophie sat on her couch. I don't like the security in this building, Michael said, especially with the baby coming. I can't exactly move right now, Sophie pointed out. I just started a new job and my savings are still low. You could stay at my condo temporarily, Michael suggested. I have a spare bedroom. It would be safer. No, thank you, Sophie said firmly. I appreciate the offer, but I need to maintain my independence. This is my home. Michael nodded, respecting her decision. At least let me pay to have a better lock installed on your door. That I can accept, Sophie said with a small smile. Sophie's phone rang. It was her doctor's office. Miss Johnson? This is Dr. Carter's office calling about your recent blood tests. The doctor would like you to come in tomorrow to discuss the results. After ending the call, Sophie looked worried. What's wrong? Michael asked. My doctor wants to see me about my blood test results, Sophie said. They wouldn't tell me anything over the phone. That could be routine, Michael said, but he looked concerned too. Maybe, Sophie said, but they usually just tell me if everything is normal. That night, after Michael left, Sophie received a call from her friend Jasmine, who worked at a housekeeping agency in Beverly Hills. Sophie, I need to warn you about something, Jasmine said. Victoria Blackwood has been calling agencies all over Beverly Hills. She's telling everyone you stole jewelry from her house." "What?" Sophie gasped. "That's a complete lie." "I know," Jasmine said, "but people are believing her." "She's making sure no one in Beverly Hills will hire you for housekeeping again." Sophie sat on her bed, feeling overwhelmed. Her job at Elite Cleaning was at risk because of Victoria's friends. Her apartment wasn't secure. Her doctor had concerning test results. And now Victoria was spreading lies that could prevent Sophie from ever working as a housekeeper again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Just checking that you're okay. Lock your door. Call me if you need anything, anytime." Sophie placed a hand on her growing belly. "Don't worry," she whispered to her daughter. "We'll figure this out." The next morning, Michael arrived at the Beverly Hills Golf Club exactly at 11 o'clock. He spotted Richard Blackwood waiting on the terrace, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive watch. Michael straightened his tie and walked toward him, preparing for a conversation that could determine both his and Sophie's future. "Richard," Michael said, extending his hand as he approached the table. "Thank you for meeting with me." Richard Blackwood stood up, shaking Michael's hand firmly. He wore a light blue golf shirt and tan pants, looking relaxed but commanding. "Michael, good to see you. Please, sit down." A server immediately approached to take Michael's drink order. After requesting water, Michael faced Richard, keeping his expression neutral. "I hear Elite Cleaning Services is doing well under your leadership," Richard began. "Your father would be proud." "Thank you," Michael said. "I try to maintain his standards while making improvements where needed." Richard nodded. "That's actually why I wanted to talk with you. I've been hearing some concerns about recent hiring decisions at your company." Michael took a careful sip of water. "Oh? What kind of concerns?" "Several friends of my wife mentioned they specifically requested not to work with one of your new employees," Richard said. "A former housekeeper, I believe?" "Sophie Johnson," Michael provided. "She's our new client relations coordinator. She has extensive experience with our cleaning standards and protocols." Richard studied Michael's face. "My wife mentioned she worked at our house until recently." "That's correct. She worked for your family for 3 years with an excellent record." "Yet Victoria says she left quite suddenly," Richard commented. Michael met Richard's gaze directly. "Mr. Blackwood, Sophie didn't leave. Your wife fired her because she's pregnant. That's pregnancy discrimination, which is illegal under federal law." Richard's expression changed slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "I see. Victoria didn't mention that detail." Their conversation was interrupted by the server bringing menus. After ordering, Richard leaned forward. "Michael, I value our business relationship. Elite Cleaning has serviced our home impeccably for years. I'm sure we can resolve any misunderstandings." "I hope so," Michael replied. "Sophie is an excellent employee who was treated unfairly. Now it seems your wife is attempting to damage her professional reputation." Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Victoria can be protective of our social circle. I'll speak with her." He changed the subject. "On a more pleasant note, we're hosting our annual summer gala in 2 weeks. We'd like Elite Cleaning to handle the preparation and post-event cleanup." "Thank you for the opportunity," Michael said. "We'd be happy to service the event." "Excellent," Richard smiled. "And of course you're invited to attend as a guest. Victoria specifically mentioned hoping you could come. She has a niece visiting from Boston she thinks you'd find interesting." Meanwhile, Sophie sat in a small coffee shop near her apartment, nervously checking her watch. After her doctor's appointment that morning, where she'd learned her blood pressure was dangerously high, she had received a text from an unknown number. "I need to talk to you about Victoria Blackwood. Coffee shop on 6th Street at 2 o'clock." A woman approached Sophie's table. She appeared to be in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Sophie?" the woman asked quietly. Sophie nodded. "Are you the person who texted me?" "Yes, I'm Rebecca Torres. I used to work for the Blackwoods like you." She sat down, glancing around nervously. I heard Victoria is spreading rumors about you. How did you get my number? Sophie asked. Jasmine gave it to me. We worked together at another agency after I left the Blackwoods. Rebecca pulled a small notebook from her bag. 3 years ago, Victoria accused me of stealing a diamond bracelet. I didn't take anything, but she fired me anyway and made sure no one in Beverly Hills would hire me again. That's exactly what she's doing to me, Sophie said. I know. That's why I wanted to help. Rebecca opened the notebook. I kept a diary of everything that happened when I worked there. The way she treated staff, the things she said. I even have recordings. Recordings? Sophie asked, surprised. Rebecca nodded. After she started accusing staff of stealing things, I recorded some of our conversations on my phone. Listen to this. She played an audio file. Victoria's voice came through clearly. I don't care if she's sick. I don't pay people to stay home with their problems. If she can't work because of her pregnancy, she can find another job. That was about the gardener's wife, Rebecca explained. Victoria found out she was pregnant and immediately told her husband to fire her. Sophie's hand went to her stomach. She's done this before. At least 3 times that I know of, Rebecca confirmed. I kept all this evidence thinking I might sue her someday, but I was too afraid. Victoria has powerful friends. This could help me if I decided to take legal action, Sophie said thoughtfully. It could, Rebecca agreed. But be careful. The Blackwoods can make life very difficult for people who challenge them. Back at Elite Cleaning Services, Sophie found Michael waiting at her desk. His meeting with Richard had ended an hour earlier. How was the doctor? He asked immediately. Sophie hesitated. Not great. My blood pressure is too high. They're worried about preeclampsia. That's serious, Michael said, looking concerned. What did the doctor recommend? Reducing stress? More rest? Sophie laughed without humor. Easy things when you're dealing with Victoria Blackwood trying to destroy your reputation. Michael guided her to a private meeting room. We need to talk about that. Richard basically confirmed Victoria is behind the client requests. But there's something else. They're hosting their annual summer gala in 2 weeks and want Elite Cleaning to handle it. And? Sophie could tell there was more. Richard invited me to attend as a guest. Victoria apparently wants to introduce me to her niece. Sophie rolled her eyes. Of course she does. I also learned something interesting, Michael continued. Richard didn't know the real reason Victoria fired you. He seemed surprised when I mentioned pregnancy discrimination. Sophie told Michael about her meeting with Rebecca Torres and the evidence she had against Victoria. This is exactly what we need, Michael said. With Rebecca's recordings, we could take legal action. But that would expose Rebecca too, Sophie pointed out. And I'm still worried about the impact on your company. Later that evening, Michael came to Sophie's apartment for dinner with her and Elena. He arrived with grocery bags and insisted on cooking for them all. Elena's children, Carlos and Maria, were delighted by Michael's offer to make tacos. As Michael chopped vegetables in Sophie's small kitchen, he said something unexpected. My mother had preeclampsia when she was pregnant with me. Sophie looked up from setting the table. She did. Michael nodded. She was on bed rest for the last 2 months of her pregnancy. That's why I was worried when you mentioned your blood pressure. What happened? Sophie asked softly. She was okay. I was born a little early but healthy. Michael paused his chopping. But it was serious. My dad said those were the scariest months of his life. This personal revelation touched Sophie. In the 2 weeks since Michael had reappeared in her life, this was the first time he'd shared something vulnerable about his family. During dinner, Elena's children asked Michael dozens of questions about his work, his car, and whether he liked video games. He answered them all patiently, making both kids laugh with his stories. As Elena helped the children with dessert, Michael turned to Sophie. I had a thought today. About Victoria Blackwood. What kind of thought? Sophie asked. What if we went to the gala together? Sophie nearly choked on her water. What? That's crazy. Victoria would never allow me in her house. Exactly, Michael said, leaning forward. She fired you illegally. She's spreading lies about you. What better way to confront her than at her most important social event, surrounded by all her friends? That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, Sophie said. I disagree, Elena said, rejoining the conversation. It's time to stand up to that woman. She can't keep treating people this way. The risk is too high, Sophie argued. Michael, your company does business with these people. Some things are more important than business, Michael said seriously. What Victoria did to you was wrong. What she's doing now is worse. After dinner, when Elena and her children had gone home, Michael showed Sophie his phone. I had James look into Victoria's hiring practices. In the past 5 years, at least 3 pregnant employees were let go from the Blackwood household. Rebecca Torres wasn't the only one. Sophie sat quietly for a long moment. If we do this, we need a solid plan. I won't walk into that house just to be humiliated again. I agree, Michael said. We'll be strategic. First, we'll speak privately with Richard. Give him a chance to address the situation. If that doesn't work, then we make it public. Sophie placed her hand on her growing belly, feeling her daughter kick. Okay, let's do it. As they discussed details of their plan, Sophie's phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. I know what you're planning for the Blackwood Gala. Victoria knows too, and she's ready for you. Sophie stared at her phone in shock, showing the text message to Michael. Someone's watching us. How could Victoria know what we're planning? Michael took the phone, reading the anonymous message. This has to be someone from the office. Only a few people knew we were discussing the gala. Diane, Sophie said immediately. She's made it clear she doesn't like me. Michael frowned. I don't want to accuse her without proof, but I'll be more careful about what I say at the office. Sophie suddenly felt very tired, the stress of the day catching up with her. Maybe this is all a bad idea. My doctor already warned me about my blood pressure. We don't have to decide tonight, Michael said gently. Get some rest. We have 2 weeks until the gala. After Michael left, Sophie had trouble sleeping. Her mind kept returning to the mysterious text and Victoria Blackwood's determination to ruin her. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of walking into the Blackwood mansion, only to find everyone pointing and laughing at her. The next morning, Sophie arrived at work to find Michael in a meeting with James from HR. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see them reviewing documents. An hour later, Michael called her into his office. I've been thinking about your position here, he began. Sophie felt her heart sink. Are you firing me because of Victoria's pressure? What? No, Michael looked surprised. The opposite, actually. I'm creating a new position, Regional Client Relations Manager. It would be a promotion from your current role. A promotion? After only 2 weeks. Michael slid a folder across his desk. This position will oversee all our Beverly Hills clients. The job description is tailored to your experience with these specific clients. You know their homes, their preferences, and their standards better than anyone else in the company. Sophie opened the folder, seeing a formal job description and a salary that made her eyes widen. This is almost twice what I'm making now. It's the appropriate pay for the responsibilities, Michael said. I've already discussed it with HR. The paperwork is backdated to last week before all this gala planning started. To make it look less reactive, Sophie realized. Michael nodded. Exactly. This way, when we attend the gala, you'll be there as a company executive, not just as my guest. For the next week, Sophie focused on learning her new role while trying to manage her health concerns. The doctor had prescribed medication for her blood pressure, but warned that stress would only make her condition worse. One afternoon, Sophie overheard Diane talking to another employee in the break room. It's ridiculous, Diane was saying. 2 weeks here and suddenly she's a manager? We all know how she got that promotion. The other employee noticed Sophie standing in the doorway and nudged Diane, who turned around. "Did you need something, Sophie?" Diane asked with a fake smile. "Yes," Sophie said, stepping into the room. "I need you to speak directly to me if you have concerns about my position. Making comments behind my back is unprofessional." Diane's smile disappeared. "Fine. I think you're using your pregnancy to trap Michael into helping you. He feels responsible for you, and you're taking advantage of that." Sophie took a deep breath, keeping her voice calm. "I earned this position through 3 years of excellent service to our most demanding clients. I understand if you're concerned about the rapid promotion, but I won't let you spread rumors about my personal life." Diane gathered her things. "Just be careful. Mixing business with personal relationships usually ends badly." She left the break room, leaving Sophie shaking slightly. That weekend, Elena helped Sophie shop for a dress to wear to the gala. They visited several maternity stores before finding an elegant navy blue gown that flattered Sophie's 5-month pregnancy. "You look beautiful," Elena said as Sophie examined herself in the dressing room mirror. "Victoria Blackwood will be so jealous." Sophie smoothed the fabric over her belly. "I'm nervous about all of this. Not just confronting Victoria, but going to this fancy party, meeting all these wealthy people." "Remember who you are," Elena told her firmly. "You're smart, capable, and you did nothing wrong. Hold your head high." The following Monday, Michael was invited to play golf with Richard Blackwood again. This time, several other business associates joined them, making it difficult for Michael to have any private conversation with Richard about Sophie. As they walked between holes, Richard mentioned casually, "Victoria is very excited about the gala. She's been planning it for months." "I'm looking forward to it," Michael replied. "I'll be bringing a guest if that's all right." Richard looked slightly surprised. "Victoria mentioned her niece was quite eager to meet you." "I'm sure she's lovely," Michael said diplomatically, "but I'm already seeing someone." "Anyone I know?" Richard asked. Michael hesitated only briefly. "Sophie Johnson, our new regional client relations manager." Richard stopped walking. "The former maid? The one Victoria fired illegally." "Yes," Michael confirmed. After a long moment, Richard simply said, "I see," and continued walking toward the next hole. That evening, Sophie had another doctor's appointment. The news wasn't good. "Your blood pressure is still too high," Dr. Carter told her, "and you're showing early signs of preeclampsia. I'm concerned, Sophie." "What does that mean for the baby?" Sophie asked worriedly. "Right now, your daughter is developing normally, but preeclampsia can lead to serious complications if not managed properly. You need to reduce stress and rest more." Sophie almost laughed. "That's not really possible right now." "Then make it possible," Dr. Carter said sternly. "Your health and your baby's health have to come first." Sophie didn't tell Michael about the doctor's warnings when he called later that night. Instead, she focused on the gala preparations. "Richard didn't seem surprised when I mentioned bringing you," Michael told her. "I think he already knew." "Because of the text," Sophie suggested. "Someone told Victoria our plans, and she told Richard." "Probably, but I still can't figure out who would have sent that warning to you." The night before the gala, Michael came over with dinner. As they ate, Sophie practiced what she would say when facing Victoria. "I need to be calm and professional," she said, "no matter what she says or does." "Remember, we'll talk to Richard first," Michael reminded her. "Give him a chance to address the situation before any public confrontation." After dinner, they sat on Sophie's couch reviewing their plan one last time. Suddenly, Michael felt something against his arm. "Was that?" he asked, surprised. Sophie smiled. "She's kicking. Do you want to feel?" Michael placed his hand on Sophie's belly, his eyes widening when he felt a strong kick. "That's amazing," he whispered. They sat quietly for a moment, both feeling their daughter move. "Sophie," Michael said finally, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I know we've only been back in each other's lives for a few weeks, but these feelings aren't new. I never stopped thinking about you when I was in New York." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "I'm scared, Michael. Not just about tomorrow, but about us. About trusting someone again." "I understand," he said. "I know I hurt you by disappearing, even though it wasn't intentional." "It's not just that," Sophie explained. "My whole life I've had to be independent. My mother raised me alone, and she always told me not to count on anyone else. Then I meet you, and suddenly I'm letting myself depend on someone." "Depending on others isn't weakness," Michael said. "We're building a family, Sophie. Whatever happens tomorrow with the Blackwoods, I want us to be together for our daughter." "I want that too," Sophie admitted. "But let's get through tomorrow first." As Michael prepared to leave, Sophie received a call from Dr. Carter's office. "Ms. Johnson, Dr. Carter wanted me to check that you're resting as instructed. Your test results today were concerning." "I'm resting," Sophie lied, looking at the gala dress hanging on her closet door. "Tell Dr. Carter not to worry." After the call, Michael looked worried. "Should you really be doing this tomorrow?" "Your health comes first." "I'll be fine," Sophie insisted. "I need to do this, Michael. Not just for me, but for Rebecca Torres and everyone else Victoria has hurt." Michael left reluctantly, promising to pick her up at 6 o'clock the next evening. As Sophie got ready for bed, she felt nervous but determined. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Sophie woke up at dawn, her mind already racing with thoughts about the gala. She had hardly slept, worrying about the mysterious text message and what might happen that evening. When she tried to put on her slippers, she noticed her feet looked puffy. Her hands, too, were swollen, making her rings tight against her fingers. "That's not good," she mumbled to herself, remembering Dr. Carter's warnings about preeclampsia symptoms. Sophie called Elena, who came over immediately. As a nurse, Elena knew what to look for. "Your ankles are really swollen," Elena said with concern, examining Sophie's feet. "Let me check your blood pressure." Elena had brought a blood pressure monitor from her apartment. She wrapped the cuff around Sophie's arm and frowned at the reading. "Sophie, this is too high. You should go to the hospital right now." "I can't," Sophie protested. "The gala is tonight. This is my only chance to confront Victoria." "Your health is more important than revenge," Elena argued. "It's not just revenge," Sophie explained. "It's about standing up to someone who hurts people and thinks she can get away with it. It's about making sure she doesn't do this to anyone else." Elena sighed, knowing how stubborn Sophie could be. "At least promise me you'll sit as much as possible tonight and leave early if you start feeling worse." "I promise," Sophie said, though she had no intention of leaving the gala before confronting Victoria. An hour later, Sophie received a call from Rebecca Torres. "Sophie, I need to warn you," Rebecca said, sounding nervous. "I heard from someone who works security that Victoria has hired extra guards for tonight. She specifically told them to watch for unwanted guests trying to enter the party." "She definitely knows we're coming," Sophie said. "Do you have any idea who might have told her?" "No, but be careful. Victoria doesn't play fair." After hanging up, Sophie called Michael. "We need to talk about tonight," she said. "Rebecca just called with some concerning information." "I was about to call you too," Michael replied. "I'm meeting with our company lawyer in an hour. Can you join us?" An hour later, Sophie sat in a downtown law office with Michael and Ashley Washington, a sharp-eyed attorney in her 40s who specialized in employment law. "So you're planning to attend this gala to confront Victoria Blackwood about firing you for being pregnant?" Ashley asked Sophie. "Yes," Sophie confirmed. "We have evidence she's done this to other employees too." Ashley looked thoughtful. "Pregnancy discrimination is clearly illegal. You have a strong case, especially with the recordings from Miss Torres. But confronting Victoria at her own social event is risky." "What kind of risks are we talking about?" Michael asked. "For Sophie, public humiliation if they refuse to let her in or cause a scene. For you, Michael, potential business consequences. Richard Blackwood has significant influence with your parent company's board. I understand the risks, Michael said firmly, but we can't let Victoria continue this pattern of discrimination. Ashley nodded. If you're determined to go forward, let me offer some advice. First, keep copies of all evidence in multiple places. Second, document everything that happens tonight. And third, try to speak with Richard privately before any public confrontation. He may be more reasonable than his wife. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Sophie's friend Jasmine arrived at her apartment with professional makeup and hair tools. Girl, you are going to be the most gorgeous pregnant woman at this party, Jasmine declared, setting up her supplies on Sophie's dining table. As Jasmine worked on Sophie's hair, Elena kept checking her blood pressure and bringing her water. Your pressure is still too high, Elena warned after the third check. Please reconsider going tonight. I'll be careful, Sophie promised again. By 5:30, the transformation was complete. Sophie's dark hair was styled in elegant waves, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. When she put on the navy blue maternity gown, even she was surprised by the reflection in the mirror. You look beautiful, Jasmine said proudly. That Victoria woman won't know what hit her. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Michael stood there in a perfectly fitted tuxedo, looking more handsome than Sophie had ever seen him. When he saw Sophie, he actually stopped breathing for a moment. Wow, he finally managed to say. You look incredible. Sophie smiled, feeling more confident. You don't look so bad yourself. Before they left, Elena pulled Michael aside in the hallway. Sophie couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could guess. Elena was warning Michael about her blood pressure and swelling. In Michael's car, Sophie asked, "What did Elena tell you?" Michael looked slightly uncomfortable. "She's worried about your health. She made me promise to watch for any signs that you're feeling unwell." "I'm fine," Sophie insisted. "Let's focus on our plan." As they drove to Beverly Hills, they reviewed their strategy one last time. "First, we find Richard and talk to him privately," Michael said. "We explain the situation calmly and give him a chance to address it." "And if he refuses?" Sophie asked. "Then we make it public. I'll announce your new position as regional manager to everyone there, making it clear that you're valued for your expertise, not discriminated against for your pregnancy." Sophie nodded, her hand resting on her belly. "And we'll reveal that I'm carrying your child." "Only if necessary," Michael cautioned. "That part of our relationship is private. We don't need to share it unless Victoria forces our hand." As they approached the Blackwood mansion, Sophie could see it was transformed. The front drive was lined with luxury cars. Valet attendants in uniforms took keys from arriving guests. The house itself was lit up spectacularly, with fairy lights wrapped around the trees and columns. "It's so beautiful," Sophie said, feeling a sudden pang of anxiety. "I cleaned those windows and polished those door handles for 3 years, and now I'm arriving as a guest." Michael squeezed her hand. "You deserve to be here, Sophie. Remember that." They pulled up to the valet station. As Michael helped Sophie out of the car, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She winced, but tried to hide it. "Are you okay?" Michael asked immediately. "Just a twinge," Sophie said, forcing a smile. "Baby girl is kicking up a storm tonight." Michael looked concerned but didn't press further. He offered his arm and they walked toward the front entrance where a security guard was checking invitations against a tablet. "Name, sir?" the guard asked. "Michael Reynolds and Sophie Johnson," Michael replied, handing over his invitation. The guard checked his tablet, his expression changing slightly when he saw Sophie's name. He spoke quietly into a small radio, then looked back at them. "Mr. Reynolds, you're welcome to enter. Ms. Johnson, one moment please." Sophie's heart sank. This was exactly what they had feared. After a brief conversation on his radio, the guard looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but Miss Johnson isn't on the approved guest list." I'm Mr. Reynolds's +1, Sophie said firmly. The invitation clearly states guests may bring a companion. Michael stepped forward. Sophie Johnson is not only my guest, but also the Regional Client Relations Manager at Elite Cleaning Services. Your employers are important clients of ours. The guard hesitated, then checked his tablet again. Let me speak to Mr. Blackwood. He stepped away to make another call. Sophie squeezed Michael's arm, feeling another sharp pain. This one was stronger than before. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. The guard returned a minute later. Mr. Blackwood says you may both enter. Please proceed to the back garden. As they walked through the familiar entrance hall that Sophie had cleaned countless times, she felt strange being on the other side of the service relationship. Guests in expensive clothes mingled with drinks in hand. Staff in black and white uniforms carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Are you ready for this? Michael asked quietly. Sophie nodded, but as they stepped into the beautifully decorated garden with its twinkling lights and string quartet, another sharp pain hit her. This time, she couldn't hide her discomfort. Michael looked alarmed. Sophie, what's wrong? Before she could answer, they both spotted Victoria Blackwood across the garden. She was wearing a stunning red dress and laughing with a group of guests. When she turned and saw Sophie, the champagne glass in her hand froze halfway to her lips. Her smile disappeared instantly. Victoria whispered something to Richard, who was standing beside her, and both of them looked over at Sophie and Michael. Here we go, Sophie whispered, straightening her back despite the pain. It's time to face the music. Victoria quickly whispered something else to her husband before plastering a smile on her face and walking toward Michael, completely ignoring Sophie. Michael, darling, we're so glad you could make it, Victoria said, air-kissing near his cheek. Richard mentioned you were bringing a guest, but he didn't say who. Her eyes slid to Sophie with cold recognition. Victoria, Michael replied with forced politeness. You remember Sophie Johnson? Victoria's smile remained fixed. Of course. How unexpected to see you here, Sophie. I believe the staff entrance is around the back. Sophie felt another sharp pain but kept her face calm. I'm not here as staff, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm here as a guest and as Elite Cleaning Services Regional Client Relations Manager. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that so? How interesting. She turned back to Michael. My niece Bethany is so looking forward to meeting you. She's just over by the fountain. Let me introduce you. Perhaps later, Michael said firmly. Sophie and I would like to speak with Richard first, if you don't mind. Victoria's smile tightened. Richard is quite busy with our guests right now. Surely whatever business matter you need to discuss can wait until Monday. It can't wait, Michael insisted. It's about an important legal matter concerning your household staff. Before Victoria could respond, Richard approached them, looking more curious than hostile. Michael, good to see you, he said, shaking Michael's hand. And this must be your guest. Yes, Richard, this is Sophie Johnson, our new Regional Client Relations Manager, though you may remember her as your former housemaid. Richard nodded. Yes, I believe I do. Victoria mentioned there was some disagreement about your departure, Ms. Johnson. Sophie felt her confidence grow. It wasn't a disagreement, Mr. Blackwood. I was fired explicitly because of my pregnancy, which is illegal under federal law. Richard's expression changed slightly. He glanced at his wife, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere private, Richard suggested, motioning toward the house. Actually, Michael said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, I think we should be transparent about what happened. Sophie was an exemplary employee for 3 years until Victoria discovered she was pregnant and fired her on the spot. Guests nearby turned to look at them. Victoria's face flushed with anger. That is a complete misrepresentation, Victoria hissed. She was let go for performance issues. Sophie shook her head. That's not true. You specifically said, and I quote, I won't have some lazy, pregnant woman waddling around my house breaking things. More guests had stopped their conversations to listen. The string quartet seemed to play more quietly, as if the musicians too were straining to hear. Victoria grabbed her husband's arm. "Richard, I will not be ambushed in our own home during our most important social event of the year." Richard looked uncomfortable. "Michael, Sophie, I apologize if there was any misunderstanding regarding the termination. Perhaps we can arrange compensation for any inconvenience." "This isn't about compensation," Michael interrupted. "It's about accountability. Victoria has a pattern of discriminating against pregnant employees. We have evidence from previous staff members as well." Victoria's face went pale. "That's absurd." "Richard, are you going to let them make these ridiculous accusations?" A small crowd had gathered around them now. Sophie recognized several women whose homes she had cleaned over the years. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable, and a few seemed almost satisfied to see Victoria on the defensive. Sophie felt another pain, stronger than before. She placed her hand on her belly, taking a deep breath. "Are you all right?" Michael asked quietly. "I'm fine," Sophie whispered back. "Let's finish this." Richard seemed torn between defending his wife and addressing the serious allegations. "If you have genuine concerns about employment practices, you should have approached me directly, not caused a scene at our gala." "We tried," Michael replied. "But while we were attempting to resolve this privately, Victoria was actively spreading lies about Sophie to prevent her from finding other work." "I did no such thing," Victoria protested. "We have proof of that too," Sophie said calmly. "Phone calls to multiple agencies describing me as a thief who stole jewelry." Whispers rippled through the crowd of guests. Victoria looked around, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. "This is preposterous," she said, trying to regain control. "Michael, I invited you here as a respected business associate. Instead, you've brought this person to deliberately embarrass us." "Sophie is not this person," Michael said firmly. "She's a valued employee of Elite Cleaning Services. In fact, I've spent the past week reorganizing our company structure. We've created a new position, Regional Client Relations Manager, to oversee service quality for all our Beverly Hills clients. Sophie is filling this position, effective immediately." Victoria scoffed. "You can't be serious. She has no qualifications for management." "On the contrary," Michael replied. "Sophie has 3 years of direct experience with our most demanding clients. She understands cleaning protocols better than anyone in our office. She's already improved client satisfaction in the 2 weeks she's been in the role." Richard looked at his wife. "Victoria, did you really fire this woman because she was pregnant?" Before Victoria could answer, Sophie gasped loudly, doubling over slightly. "Sophie?" Michael asked with concern, putting his arm around her. "I'm okay," she managed, but her face showed pain. Victoria saw an opportunity to change the subject. "See, Richard? This is exactly why I didn't want a pregnant employee, always making scenes and seeking attention." Something in Michael snapped at Victoria's cruel words. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sophie is not seeking attention. She's standing up against discrimination that affects women everywhere." He turned to address the crowd of guests directly. "I have one more announcement to make. The baby Sophie is carrying is mine." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's mouth fell open. "We lost contact due to unfortunate circumstances," Michael continued. "But now we've found each other again." Sophie looked at Michael with surprise and gratitude, but then her face changed to shock. She felt a rush of warm liquid running down her legs, forming a small puddle on the expensive garden pavers. "Michael," she whispered urgently, "my water just broke." Michael's eyes widened. "But it's too early." "You're only 5 months along." "Almost 6, Sophie corrected, grimacing with pain. "But still too early. We need to go to the hospital. Now." The guests around them backed away, giving them space. Victoria stood frozen in shock, while Richard immediately took charge. "I'll call an ambulance," he offered, pulling out his phone. "No time," Michael said, already guiding Sophie toward the exit. "My car is closer. We need to get to Cedars-Sinai right away." As Michael helped Sophie through the crowded garden, guests parted to let them pass. Some offered words of concern and support, others simply stared in shock. "I'll get the car," the valet said, running ahead after seeing Sophie's condition. While they waited those brief moments for the car, Sophie looked back at the Blackwood mansion. Victoria stood alone on the garden patio, her perfect party in ruins around her. For a brief second, their eyes met across the distance. Then Richard approached his wife and said something that made her face crumble. "The car's here," Michael said urgently. Sophie turned away from Victoria, focusing on Michael and their baby. As he helped her into the passenger seat, another strong contraction hit. "Hang on, Sophie," Michael said, getting into the driver's seat. "We'll be at the hospital in 15 minutes. As they pulled away from the Blackwood mansion, Sophie saw Richard standing in the driveway, watching them leave. He seemed to be speaking into his phone with a determined expression on his face. "This isn't how I imagined the evening ending," Sophie said through gritted teeth as another contraction came. "Me neither," Michael admitted, speeding toward the hospital, "but some things are more important than confronting Victoria Blackwood." Sophie placed both hands on her belly, worried about their daughter coming so early. "Please drive faster," she whispered. Michael sped through the streets of Beverly Hills, running a red light as he headed toward Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Sophie gripped the door handle, breathing heavily as another contraction hit. "Try to stay calm," Michael said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We're almost there." "It's too early," Sophie gasped. "She's not supposed to come for another 6 weeks." Michael made a sharp turn. "Dr. Carter will know what to do. I already called the hospital. They're expecting us." Sophie looked down at her beautiful navy dress, now wet and ruined. The pain was getting worse. Between contractions, she noticed her hands were even more swollen than this morning. "Michael," she said quietly, "I think this is related to my blood pressure. The preeclampsia Dr. Carter warned me about." Michael glanced at her with worry. "Why didn't you tell me it was that serious?" "I didn't want you to stop me from going to the gala," Sophie admitted. "I needed to face Victoria." They pulled up to the emergency entrance of Cedars-Sinai. Michael barely stopped the car before jumping out and running around to Sophie's side. A team with a wheelchair was already waiting. "Sophie Johnson, 28 weeks pregnant, water broke about 20 minutes ago," Michael explained rapidly as they helped Sophie into the wheelchair. A doctor in scrubs approached them. "I'm Dr. Patel. We spoke on the phone. Let's get her inside immediately." Everything moved quickly after that. Sophie was taken to a room where nurses hooked her up to monitors. Dr. Carter arrived within minutes, her face serious as she examined Sophie. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," Dr. Carter said, "and the baby is showing signs of distress. I'm concerned about placental abruption due to the preeclampsia." "What does that mean?" Sophie asked, frightened. "It means we need to perform an emergency C-section," Dr. Carter explained. "We can't wait for a natural delivery." Michael held Sophie's hand tightly. "Will they be okay?" "We're going to do everything we can," Dr. Carter assured them. "But I need to be honest. Delivery at 28 weeks comes with risks. The baby will need to stay in the NICU for some time." Sophie began to cry. "This is my fault. I should have listened when you told me to rest." "This isn't anyone's fault," Dr. Carter said firmly. "Preeclampsia can happen to anyone. Right now, we need to focus on getting both of you through this safely." Everything happened in a blur after that. Sophie was wheeled to an operating room. Michael was given scrubs to wear so he could stay with her. The anesthesiologist explained the spinal block they would give her. "I'm scared," Sophie whispered to Michael as they prepared her for surgery. "I'm right here," he promised, squeezing her hand. "I'm not going anywhere." In the waiting room, Elena had arrived after Michael called her from the car. She paced back and forth, worried about her friend. When her phone rang, she answered immediately. "Elena Rodriguez?" This is Richard Blackwood. I understand you're a friend of Sophie Johnson's." Helena was surprised. "Yes, I am. How did you get my number?" "Michael called my phone before they took Sophie into surgery," Richard explained. "I wanted to check on her condition. She's in emergency surgery right now," Helena said cautiously. "Why do you care? Your wife is the reason she's in this situation." There was a pause on the line. "I'm aware of that, and I intend to address it. Please keep me informed about Sophie and the baby." Back at the Blackwood mansion, most guests had left after the dramatic scene in the garden. Richard found Victoria in their bedroom, removing her jewelry with shaking hands. "How dare they ruin our gala?" Victoria fumed. "That girl always was trouble, and Michael Reynolds, bringing her here to embarrass us in front of everyone." Richard closed the bedroom door firmly. "Victoria, I've just spoken with our attorney. What you did to Sophie Johnson was illegal, clear-cut pregnancy discrimination." "Don't be ridiculous," Victoria scoffed. "She was an employee at will. I can fire her for any reason." "No, you cannot," Richard said sharply. "Federal law specifically prohibits firing someone because they're pregnant, and now I hear you've been calling agencies, telling them she stole from us? That's defamation." Victoria turned to face her husband. "You've always let me handle the household staff. Why are you suddenly concerned?" "Because Sophie Johnson is now in emergency surgery, fighting for her life and her baby's life, and our friends just watched you mock a woman whose water broke at our party." For the first time, Victoria looked uncertain. "Is she really in danger?" "Yes," Richard said firmly, "and we're going to fix this. I've already called our attorney to prepare a settlement offer." In the operating room, doctors worked quickly. Sophie was awake but couldn't feel anything below the screen set up across her chest. Michael sat by her head, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. "I can see the baby," Dr. Carter announced. A moment later, a tiny, weak cry filled the room. "It's a girl, just like we knew," the doctor said. "We need to take her to the NICU immediately." Sophie caught only a glimpse of her daughter, tiny, reddish, and so small, before nurses whisked her away. "4 pounds, 3 ounces," a nurse called out. "Go with her," Sophie told Michael. "Don't leave her alone." Before Michael could respond, one of the monitors began beeping rapidly. Dr. Carter looked concerned. "Sophie's blood pressure is dropping." "She's hemorrhaging. We need more units of blood now." The last thing Sophie heard was Michael's voice saying, "I love you," before everything went dark. Hours later, Sophie woke up in the intensive care unit. Her mouth was dry and her body felt heavy and sore. A nurse noticed she was awake and came to check on her. "Welcome back," the nurse said gently. "You gave everyone quite a scare." "My baby," Sophie whispered. "Where's my daughter?" "She's in the NICU," the nurse explained. "Your boyfriend has been going back and forth between you two all night." "Is she okay?" Sophie asked, her voice breaking. "She's very small, but she's a fighter. The doctor can tell you more." Just then, Michael walked in looking exhausted but smiling when he saw Sophie awake. "You're back," he said, taking her hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Sophie admitted. "How's our daughter?" Michael pulled out his phone. "She's amazing. Look, I took videos." He showed Sophie a tiny baby in an incubator connected to various tubes and monitors. "The doctors say she's doing well considering how early she is. Her lungs need help breathing, but she's strong." "Have you named her?" the nurse asked. Sophie and Michael looked at each other. They had discussed names, but hadn't decided. "Olivia," Sophie said. "Olivia Grace Reynolds." "It's perfect," Michael agreed, tears in his eyes. For the next 3 days, Sophie remained in the hospital recovering from surgery and the complications of preeclampsia. Michael set up a laptop in her room connected to a camera near Olivia's incubator so Sophie could see her daughter even when she couldn't visit in person. On the 4th day, Sophie was finally well enough to be taken to the NICU in a wheelchair. A nurse helped her wash her hands thoroughly before approaching Olivia's incubator. "She's so tiny," Sophie whispered, looking at her daughter through the clear plastic. Olivia was smaller than a loaf of bread with tubes and wires attached to her little body. "Would you like to touch her?" the NICU nurse asked. "You can put your hands through these openings." Sophie carefully placed her hand inside the incubator. Gently, she touched Olivia's tiny hand with her finger. To her surprise and joy, the baby gripped her finger. "She knows her mama," the nurse said with a smile. Michael stood behind Sophie's wheelchair, watching the beautiful moment between mother and daughter. His phone rang, and he stepped away to answer it. When he returned, his expression was serious. That was Richard Blackwood. He's offering a settlement for the discrimination claim. A substantial one. "I don't care about money right now," Sophie said, still watching Olivia. "I know," Michael said, "but I had an idea. What if we used the settlement to start a foundation? One that helps housekeepers and domestic workers who face workplace discrimination." Sophie looked up at him. "That's a wonderful idea. But maybe we should save some for Olivia's education too." "Absolutely," Michael agreed. "We'll set up a college fund for her first." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ashley Washington, Michael's lawyer, who had been handling communications with the Blackwoods' attorney. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Ashley said, looking at baby Olivia with a soft smile, "but I wanted to tell you in person. After what happened at the gala, several former employees of the Blackwoods have come forward with similar claims of discrimination." "How many?" Michael asked. "5 so far," Ashley replied. 3 of them were pregnant when Victoria fired them. The others faced other types of discrimination. They all heard about Sophie standing up to Victoria. Sophie looked back at her tiny daughter. "Hear that, Olivia? You're not even a week old, and you're already helping change things for the better." As Sophie gently stroked her daughter's arm through the incubator opening, she felt a strange mix of emotions: fear for Olivia's health, gratitude that they had both survived, satisfaction that Victoria was facing consequences, and hope for their future together as a family. Outside in the hallway, unnoticed by anyone, Victoria Blackwood stood watching through the NICU window, her expression unreadable as she observed the tiny baby and her parents. A nurse spotted Victoria standing outside the NICU window and approached her cautiously. "Can I help you? Only family members are allowed to view the babies." Victoria straightened her designer jacket. "I'm not family. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. "Victoria!" Sophie had turned in her wheelchair and noticed her former employer through the window. Michael stood protectively beside Sophie. "I'll ask her to leave." "No," Sophie said quietly. "Let me talk to her. Please." 6 months later, Sophie sat in a comfortable lounge chair in the backyard of her new Sherman Oaks home. She watched as Michael gently placed 6-month-old Olivia on a soft blanket in the grass. The baby immediately rolled onto her stomach and pushed herself up on her arms, looking around with curious eyes. "She gets stronger every day," Michael said proudly, sitting in the chair next to Sophie. "The doctors can't believe how well she's doing." Olivia had thrived despite her early arrival. After 8 weeks in the NICU, she had finally come home weighing 5 pounds, 7 ounces. Now, at 6 months, she was catching up to the size of full-term babies her age. Sophie smiled, watching her daughter. "Remember how tiny she was? I was so scared." "Me too," Michael admitted. "Those first few weeks, I was afraid to even touch her." Sophie reached for Michael's hand. So much had changed in 6 months. After Olivia's birth, Michael had helped Sophie find this single-story home in a family-friendly neighborhood. With 3 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a fenced backyard, it was perfect for their new family. Sophie had also thrived in her role as regional client relations manager at Elite Cleaning Services. She had implemented a comprehensive employee protection policy ensuring that no one else experienced the discrimination she faced. "Are you ready for today?" Michael asked, checking his watch. "The press conference starts at 2 o'clock. "I'm a little nervous," Sophie admitted. "But yes, I'm ready." Today was the official launch of the Domestic Workers Justice Foundation, funded by the Blackwood Settlement and additional contributions from elite cleaning services. The foundation would provide legal support to household employees facing discrimination. "Your speech is perfect," Michael assured her, "and you look amazing in that new suit." Sophie glanced down at her navy blue pantsuit, purchased specifically for this occasion. "Elena helped me pick it out. She said I needed to look powerful." As they gathered their things to leave, Sophie thought back to Victoria Blackwood's unexpected hospital visit the day after Olivia's birth. Michael had been getting coffee when a nurse showed Victoria into Sophie's room. "I don't want to upset you," Victoria had said, standing awkwardly at the foot of the hospital bed. "Richard insisted I come." Sophie had been too tired and sore to feel much anger. "Why are you here, Victoria?" Victoria had sighed, looking older and less polished than usual. "To apologize. What I did to you was wrong. Richard has made that very clear to me." "You didn't just do it to me," Sophie had pointed out. "You've fired other pregnant women too." Victoria had looked down at her expensive shoes. "Yes, Richard is making me attend sensitivity training and therapy to address my behavior. He says it's that or a divorce." The apology hadn't seemed entirely sincere, but Sophie had appreciated the effort. "Thank you for coming. I hope you learned something from the training." Now, 6 months later, Sophie and Michael arrived at the downtown hotel where the press conference would take place. James from HR greeted them in the lobby. "Everything's ready in the conference room," he reported. "We've got about 30 reporters and several former household employees who want to support the foundation." Sophie checked her appearance one last time in a lobby mirror. Her hair was now styled in a sleek bob, and she had gained confidence in the way she carried herself. "You'll be wonderful," Michael assured her. "Just speak from the heart like we practiced." In the conference room, rows of chairs faced a small stage with a podium. Sophie took a deep breath when she saw the crowd. This was so different from her former life as a housemaid. As Michael introduced her to various reporters and supporters, Sophie spotted a familiar face entering the room. Richard Blackwood, dressed in an expensive suit, nodded politely in their direction. "I didn't expect him to come," Sophie whispered to Michael. "He confirmed yesterday," Michael said. "He's representing his family's commitment to the foundation." "Is Victoria here?" Sophie asked, looking around. Michael shook his head. "No, just Richard." The press conference began with Michael welcoming everyone and explaining the purpose of the Domestic Workers Justice Foundation. Then he introduced Sophie as the inspiration behind the initiative. When Sophie stepped up to the podium, she felt momentarily nervous looking at all the faces watching her. Then she spotted Elena and her children sitting in the front row, smiling encouragingly. "6 months ago, I was fired from my job as a housemaid because I was pregnant," Sophie began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It wasn't the first time I'd faced discrimination, but it was the moment I decided to stop accepting it as normal." She explained how the foundation would provide legal help, educational resources, and support to household workers facing similar situations. "No one should lose their livelihood because they're starting a family," Sophie said. "And no one should feel powerless because they clean houses for a living. Domestic workers deserve the same protections as every other employee." After the press conference, Richard Blackwood approached Sophie and Michael. "That was an excellent presentation," he said to Sophie. "You're quite a different person from the quiet maid who worked in our home." "Thank you for coming, Richard," Michael said, "and for your family's contribution to the foundation." Richard nodded. "It's the right thing to do. Victoria sends her regards." His hesitation made it clear Victoria had sent no such message. That evening, Sophie, Michael, and Olivia met Elena and her children at a family restaurant to celebrate the successful launch. "You were amazing," Elena exclaimed, hugging Sophie. "I was so proud watching you up there." "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Sophie told her friend. "You've supported me through everything." As they enjoyed their meal, Carlos asked Michael dozens of questions about the foundation and how it would help people. Michael answered each one patiently, clearly enjoying the boy's curiosity. During dessert, Michael excused himself from the table. When he returned a few minutes later, he seemed nervous. "Sophie," he said, standing beside her chair, "these past 6 months have been the most challenging and most wonderful of my life." Sophie looked up at him, confused by his formal tone. Then, as Michael lowered himself to one knee beside the table, she realized what was happening. "I had planned something more elaborate," Michael said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "But being here with you, Olivia, and the people who helped us through everything felt right." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Sophie Johnson, will you marry me?" Sophie felt tears fill her eyes as Elena gasped and the children watched with wide eyes. "Yes," Sophie said, her voice catching. "Yes, I will." The restaurant erupted in applause as Michael slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. Later that night, after putting Olivia to bed in her crib, Sophie and Michael sat in the living room of their Sherman Oaks home. Sophie kept looking at the ring on her finger, still not quite believing everything that had happened. "I was thinking about a small wedding," she said, "with Elena as my maid of honor." "That sounds perfect," Michael agreed. "Whatever makes you happy." Sophie leaned against him on the couch. "I registered for my business classes today, 2 nights a week starting next month." Michael looked at her with pride. "You're going to be an amazing business owner someday." "I want to start my own cleaning company," Sophie explained. "One that treats workers fairly from the beginning." "I'll help in any way I can," Michael promised. They stood together on their back porch later, looking at the stars. Michael draped his jacket over Sophie's shoulders as the night air cooled. "A year ago, I was a housemaid living paycheck to paycheck," Sophie said quietly. "Now I'm engaged, with a beautiful daughter, a good job, and plans for my own business." Michael put his arm around her waist. "You made it happen, Sophie. Your strength through everything amazes me." "We made it happen," Sophie corrected him. "You, me, Elena, and even the Blackwoods in their way." Inside the house, Olivia made a small noise through the baby monitor. Both parents listened, but she settled back to sleep. "I should check on her anyway," Sophie said, smiling. "I still like to watch her breathe sometimes." As they walked back inside, hand in hand, Sophie thought about the long journey from that terrible day in the Blackwood mansion to this moment of peace and happiness. She had lost a job but found a family, a purpose, and her own voice along the way. Together they peeked into Olivia's nursery. Their daughter slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily, unaware that her dramatic early arrival had changed so many lives for the better. "Sweet dreams, little one," Sophie whispered. "Tomorrow is a brand new day." If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen